So I do see some new faces and maybe you're somewhat new to me. And if so, I'm just going to give a brief introduction and let you know what's happening today. Although I think you probably know why you're here. My name is Elisha Celeste, and I've been in private practice. Not so much anymore. I only work with a few clients here and there. But been in private practice for about 17 years, working with people in pain mostly. So I mostly have worked with people in chronic pain. Um, and that has come with, working with a lot of the things that also come with pain when it's chronic, such as trauma, autoimmune conditions, difficulty detoxing, those kinds of things. So I've learned a lot about what it means to be human, to own a body, to go through various things in life and end up with pain or an illness or disease. And the primary way that I have worked with clients has been through Kinetix, which is my method of partner fascia release, and then mapping. It's a mapping methodology for figuring out root causes, because I don't want to manage anyone's pain. I don't want to manage my own pain. I want to get rid of it. I want to resolve it. I want to figure it out, do what needs to be done to transform, and then move on with my life. I'm guessing that's probably what you want with anything you're dealing with. I doubt you want to just manage it, where you're like not debilitated, but not feeling so wonderful either. So I'm really all about getting to the root of things, asking why. And if you love asking why, then you're in the right place, because we're going to ask why together. So if any of you have ever been accused of being too analytical or asking too many questions, you're in good company here. We're going to be doing a lot of that. And then this class today is an introduction to a 9-month study group that I've just opened up, and I'm offering for the very first time. I'm very excited about it. It's called Secrets of Fascia. So that's kind of the title of the whole thing. And the reason I've decided to do this study group is anytime I've taught a class on fascia before, I feel like I have to go really fast and go through a bunch of bullet points and basically just be a fire hose of information that you can probably barely take all of it in, or make sense of it. And then all of the courses that I've taught online are typically more geared towards teaching kinetics or teaching, in the past, I used to teach self-fascia release courses and that kind of thing. And there's not a lot of room for education and learning and being curious together. So this 9-month study group is going to be really luxurious for me to take 9 months with you to meander through and go really deep and thoroughly through every aspect of fascia's involvement in a physical function, our spiritual health, our emotional lives, our relationships, how we feel in our bodies on a daily basis, pain and freedom, sickness and health, trauma, and how we transform. So today, I want to introduce this idea that I'm presenting, that fascia is a mediator between material and spiritual worlds, or another way of thinking about it is that fascia is a mediator between the material and spiritual human being. And this has come from my 17 years of working with fascia, and it's the most important thing, I believe, anyway, for us to be aware of if we want to work with our own fascia. If we're a practitioner, if any of you are practitioners, you can let me know in the chat. If you work with other people's fascia. And so I'm going to start us off by kind of asking a trick question. So I'm going to tell you right off the bat that it's a trick question because I'm not trying to trick you. With this study group and with this class, oh, and by the way, I will put a link here. I had it pasted to the Secrets of Fascia study group if you want to register. You do have to register for it unless you're already in our circle community. And then if you're not, you can find all those classes. But when you register, you'll actually get all of my email reminders of upcoming classes, what the topics are, the replays, etc. So if you like email reminders like I do, then I encourage you to actually register for it. So my trick question, that's not really trying to trick you. So as most of you know, because you've probably found me on YouTube, For many years, I taught self-fascia release techniques on YouTube. There are some Kinetix techniques on YouTube as well. So Kinetix is, again, using partner fascia release, and then there's the method is a way of mapping. And so if you scroll through a lot of the comments that are on those technique videos, you are going to see a whole variety of responses. And so I want to bring 3 of those responses here and ask you to contemplate them with me before we kind of go into this class together. So there's a technique on my YouTube channel for the quad technique that suggests, I tell people in the video, this can help with lower back pain, pelvic floor issues, groin pain, and a bunch of other things. And you're going to find 3 types of comments under that video. One type of comment is going to be from somebody saying something like, "Holy cow, this worked. You're amazing. I love you, Elisha." And that, of course, feels really nice for me to hear. Another type of comment that I get, I just got this morning, actually, on a different video, a different technique, but you're going to find these kinds of comments on every single technique. So another person says, "I tried this technique and nothing happened. How frustrating." So that's person number 2. Not having the same experience as person number 1. And a third person, now this doesn't happen as often, but it does happen, says, "I did the technique as you instructed and my back pain got worse. Is that normal?" Now, my question to you, this is the trick questions that's not really meant to be a trick, is which of these 3 people is right? Does the technique work? Does it just do nothing? Or does it make people's pain worse?
All of the above.
Yes. And you guys already got it, right? So what am I doing? You don't even need me to teach you anything. You got it. But this has been my message for so long, and it's really hard for us to wrap our minds around sometimes, because we tend to think if something works for us, it just works, period, meaning it will work for every body and everybody. We also tend to think if it doesn't work for us, it just doesn't work, and it won't work for anybody. And then when something makes us worse, we tend to think it's bad or wrong. There's something wrong with that technique or that person, or the way they taught it or something. And none of those things are true. So in the first question, which of them is right? All of them, all 3 people are right. It worked, it didn't work, and it made someone's pain worse. So the point of me asking this question in front of this class, at the top of the class, is if you're going to work with fascia, wouldn't it be a good idea to actually learn what it is you're really doing and what fascia really is, and why it works sometimes when it does work, and why it just doesn't do anything when it doesn't do anything, and why it makes some people's pain worse? That would be really good information, right? Especially when it comes to your own body. So whether it's a fascia release technique, protocol, or a method, or a modality, or a practitioner you're going to see, or a diet, or something happens to you and you're seeking out help, or you're researching on the internet, I highly encourage you to adopt the mindset that I am a unique individual. My body is unique to me. It's going to respond differently than other people. And my job is to get to know myself so I know what works for me. That's what I want to help you do through the lens of fascia. So fascia is always reflecting to us. It's always reflecting our individual nature to us. So in the 3 examples I gave you, when a fascia release technique works for somebody, it's reflecting something about that person to them. When it just doesn't do anything, it's reflecting something equally important to that person. And when it makes someone's pain worse, that's also actually really good information for that person to know. Learning how to actually interpret that is a science, and an art, especially if you're a practitioner, it's more of an art. And if you're just wanting to work on your own body and be your own practitioner, then it's still kind of an art, but more of a science. So fascia is really amazing in that way because there are a lot of other things that we can do that might get us really good data, like going on different diets and trying different movement methods and that kind of thing. But when we actually go into the body and we contact and attempt to work with or change something inside of us, like fascia, that's really good information. Like that's information coming from our insides, coming from our body, as opposed to coming from the internet or coming from someone even like me. Like my goal isn't to teach you about fascia and just have you take everything I say as gospel. My goal really today, and then the invitation if you want to take this further and join the study group, is to teach you how to learn from fascia. That's really my goal. I'm going to share a lot about what I've learned, but my goal is to inspire you to become a student of your own fascia and to make fascia a teacher to you. So this class is going to be kind of casual and big picture. And it's, as I mentioned, kind of an introduction to this 9-month study group that starts October 2nd, next Thursday. And starting next Thursday, we're just going to dive in and get to learning. So today, I wanted to share just a few stories. I want to share a little bit more about like me and my thoughts on this and how I came to this. How I've been studying, what I've been studying. So I think not just what we study, but how we study matters. And then next week, we're going to just dive in and actually start learning. So next week, I'm going to start teaching a lot about fascia and then also guiding you through ways you can get to know your own fascia as a teacher. So today, a little bit more about me in case, like I said, some of you I think are new here. If you are, I'd love to know. Yeah, I'd love to know if you're new to me. If not, you might be hearing a story for the 10th time today if you've been hanging out with me for any length of time. Gazala, I don't know if I'm saying that right. You're new. Okay, great. Welcome. Trish, you're new. Elisha, nice name. Sandra, great. Okay, welcome. Thank you. So I know there are some people, either watching this later or perhaps here today have been with me for years, and some of you are brand new. Sue, you're also new. Great. Okay, so next week, the very first class of the study group is going to be diving into like what is fascia from both a scientific perspective, like what does modern science have to say about it. So I'm not going to get into that kind of detail today. Here's what I want to share with you. I came to this world, this bodywork world, with my own pain. That's really what sent me on a quest for healing and answers. I think that's true of a lot of practitioners. I'm imagining that's probably why a lot of you are here. So I had a lot of traumatic experiences growing up and ended up in chronic pain head to toe by the time I was 17. So I was dealing with pretty debilitating gut pain, systemic tension, really bad jaw pain that made me talk funny. There's still remnants of that today. And then I had knee pain that was preventing me from running and hiking. Not by 17, but by 22, I had stopped running and hiking due to knee pain. So I allowed the pain to shrink my world, and I became a gym rat for about 8 years, where I wasn't on trails. Right now I live in Colorado. I haven't always lived in Colorado. I didn't grow up here. But my favorite thing is being outside, being on a trail, being in nature, breathing fresh air, trail running, hiking. Those are my two favorite things to do. And they represented freedom to me. Those activities represented freedom. And so For a long time, I felt trapped inside my body. My body felt like a torture chamber. I did not understand my body. It felt like my body was an entity that was committed to torturing me every day. And I didn't understand that my body was actually trying to help me that whole time. It took me a really long time to figure out that the pain was my body trying to help me. In fact, it was my body helping me, not just trying to. It was literally helping me. But it took me a really long time to see that. And so for a long time, I tried to force my body to change. And I'm not going to tell you all the details and all the things I've tried, or we'd be here forever. But I wanted you to know, those of you that are new here, that that's what brought me into this world of fascia and working with bodies. And every time I sought help from a practitioner or a teacher, I wanted them to be like, what I really wanted was to know why my body was doing this. So I'd love to know if, you can share in the chat if you want, if you share that desire to know why. Not everybody does. And there's nothing wrong with not wanting to know. Some people could care less. They just want to get out of pain. And you might think that at a conscious level, like I could care less. I just want to get out of pain. But I've come to learn after 17 years of working with people in pain that it is the rare individual that is willing to let go of their pain if they don't understand it before understanding it. And I think, this makes sense when you think about our survival biology and the way we're designed, because anything that could cause us such debilitating pain or misery, if it goes away, but we don't know why it went away, could come back at any moment, right? It could come back today, tomorrow, in 30 seconds. And so when we know why, it helps us let go. It helps us actually understand and then let go so we can put things in their rightful place and understand kind of what's what. So in my own quest for answers about why I was in pain, I went to all kinds of people, and most of the time what happened, all kinds of practitioners, naturopaths, hypnotherapists, massage therapists, chiropractors, naturopathic doctors, kinesiologists, mainly not Western medicine for me, mostly in the alternative healing arts. And the majority of the time, I guess I'm being kind when I say that, it was every single time the practitioner applied their protocol to me and then expected me to get better. And then when I didn't, would just say, well, I don't know, maybe this isn't for you. That was really frustrating because I wanted to know why I was in pain. And so I'm sharing this to give you an idea of who I am and how I go about learning and how I go about working with clients and how I go about teaching, because I'm not content with someone just saying, here, try this diet and see if it works. I'm immediately going to have questions. Why? Why do you think this diet will work for me? Why do you want to do this? Why should I do this? Why do you think it'll work for me? And if there's no answer that makes sense to me, I'm going to be quite skeptical of it. Maybe some of you can relate. So in 2008, I was in massage school, still full of chronic pain, still not understanding my body. However, I did have 3 years behind me of really dedicated, consciously, purposeful emotional work. So I had done about 3 years of emotional healing, mostly through journaling. And so I just mentioned that because I do think it's important and it made a difference. But my body was still doing what it was doing. My body, it's not like when I healed my emotions. Like I see thumbnails on YouTube all the time that say, heal your emotions to heal your body. And maybe that works sometimes, but it didn't for me. Like my body was still doing what it was doing, even though I had addressed a lot of the emotional layers. And this points to something that feels like my passion to share with the world, which is, I believe, actually, it's not a belief, it's a knowing. I know that we are governed by material and spiritual laws. It is not all energy, and it is not all matter. They both have equal weight in our reality and our experience of reality. And so you can work on your emotions all day long, but for example, if you don't address the underlying actual physical fascial adhesions, let's say, that might be causing blood not to get to a joint, which is then causing tendonitis, like no amount of emotional healing is going to do anything about that. And likewise, no amount of releasing these fascial adhesions and just trying to like aggressively release them is going to heal you at an emotional level just because you worked on your physical body. So in 2008, I was in massage school and I got stepped on for the first time. And that is the moment that I was introduced to the world of fascia. So this was the first time I'd heard the word fascia. And it was my instructor in massage school that was asking if any of us students wanted to try something different than massage and get stepped on. And I had no idea what to expect. I had no idea what this thing was, but my hand shot in the air and I was like, me, I absolutely have to do this. And Chuck was my instructor's name. He stepped on me on my calves. And within 30 seconds, I had the experience, I had an overwhelming experience of knowing in that moment, I'm going to hike and run again. My body is going to be okay. I'm going to be able to help my body. And it's going to be through this thing called fascia. And I believed at the time it was going to be through getting stepped on. But I, in that moment in 2008, fell into the camp of it didn't work. That's frustrating. It didn't make my pain worse. And it wasn't a miracle. It didn't just work magically. So that was my entry point to the world of fascia. Was I was the person that believed it was going to help, and then it didn't work, but I believed still that it would. And so the reason I wanted to share that is because I don't think that what I have to teach today, most of what I'm sharing and teaching about and writing about and filming videos about and teaching classes in person about, would carry much weight if I was someone who got stepped on. And the very first time I got stepped on, I had a miraculous transformation. It got me instantly out of pain and I never had to look back. And that was that. I think it would, I don't know, I don't know what I'd even have to teach you other than go get stepped on. It's miraculous. And then I'd be oblivious to all the people who it doesn't work for or who it does nothing for, where it's neutral. So because I was the person who it didn't work for, but it didn't make me worse, I had to figure out why. I wanted to figure out why. I had all these questions, like, why did it not work? Why do I still feel the same? And none of my teachers could answer that question. So I had to figure that out for myself. And it took about 2.5 years before I got answers. So I had to be patient. So for about 2.5 years, I was attending dozens of these workshops where we were getting stepped on and stepping on each other. And that modality, if you're curious, is called Rossiter. It's the reason I'm even here teaching my version of stepping on people, which is different. So Rossiter is a modality that does a pinning and stretching of fascia. So they're trying to pin it to the floor and then stretch it like taffy. Kinetix uses a compression and shearing based modality of fascia release that I just started doing intuitively. And that's a longer story than we have time for today. I'll probably tell it at some point during the study group. So compression and shearing is very different physiologically, physically. It feels very different. It does a lot of different things in the body than a pin and stretch. And nothing was happening for 2.5 years. So for 2.5 years, getting stepped on in this way just was neutral. It was a neutral experience, other than it kept reinforcing this feeling I had, this knowing that I was going to be able to run again and hike again, and somehow getting stepped on was going to get me there. And you might call me kind of insane or incredibly stubborn. I guess I'll take that because I can be really persistent, but only when I have a knowing. And you guys probably feel the same way, I'm sure, sometimes. And so it wasn't until I asked my best friend, Jess, to learn to step on me my way, this compression and shearing way, in 2011 that I started to get anywhere. And I actually started to get somewhere pretty quickly. And that experience, as many of you know that story, it changed my life. It's why I'm here talking to you. It was the birthplace of Kinetix and the mapping methodology. So I want to, those of you that are new here especially, ask another question of you. And the reason I'm going to ask you questions a lot today, and if you join the Secrets of Fascia 9-month study group, I'll be asking you a lot of questions there too, is to get you to think, to think with me. I don't believe I have all the answers. I think when we come together in a hive mind, we're more intelligent when we put our minds together. But also I want to think together. I don't just want to talk at you. So my best friend Jess, who I'd known since 7th grade, she and I moved to Colorado in 2011 together, and we hadn't seen each other. We hadn't lived in the same state or town since I was 17. So quite a few years had passed, almost as many as, when I left California, which is where we knew each other. So we reconnected through Facebook and then decided to move to Colorado together. And within a week of moving into this mountain house, I asked Jess if she would learn to step on me and help me run and hike again. And she said, sure, that sounds fun. And it was such a different experience than anything that I had experienced up to that point in any of these workshops that I'd been attending. Again, it changed my life. And so my question for you is, what do you imagine was different about working with a friend, my friend, versus attending a workshop? Yeah. So I'm just looking at the comments. Yeah, Jess loved me. The love. Yes. Yes. Trust. Absolutely. Absolutely. Intention. Yes. No, yes. No expectations. Absolutely. So working with a friend was life-changing. It was so completely different from all the practitioners that I had to pay, who had it was like one neat and tidy hour with them or 90 minutes or whatever it is, and then I'm out the door. And then if I want to go back or ask a question, I have to pay again. And so, yeah, it was just a completely different experience. And that taught me how to do practitionership. And which is to basically attempt to do that, to be a friend to people, to come from love, to invite people into a different kind of relationship than we typically have with practitioners. And I've been chastised very severely by some people over the years for doing that. It's unprofessional. It's scope of practice and all of that kind of thing. And I don't care. So there's so much to learn from that experience, though, about fascia. And so this is why I wanted to tell that story, because for 2.5 years, I attended, as I mentioned, about nearly 24 Rossiter workshops. And I'm not making them wrong. And I'm not, in fact, it's just, this is me just pointing to a phenomenon in the healing arts, generally speaking, which is that teachers typically of modalities offer workshops where they teach the protocol, the modality, the technique. That's it. But they don't talk about the human being. We don't talk about love, about trust, about reciprocity, about all the defenses we might be having because we don't know each other yet. All of that is just like ignored and shoved in the closet, and we have to pretend it doesn't exist while we're all getting, stepped on, which is really intense and also kind of intimate, but not in a sexual way, but just, it's really intense, and it's two bodies coming together. And that always felt kind of weird to me to not talk about those things. And Jess and I were just laughing, giggling, talking about it all, and letting it all out in the open. So yeah, Jess also had no practitioner knowledge, training, bias. Absolutely, Margie. Great comment. Yeah. So she brought no projections, no assumptions or expectations or the hat of an expert to the whole thing, no ego. And that made it so much different. But the point I was just trying to make was about fascia. My fascia literally didn't feel any different for 2.5 years. I was that person. I was like, my God, like here I am, like getting stepped on, I don't know how many hours, hundreds, I think I've added it up at some point, hundreds of hours of getting stepped on and nothing changed in my fascia. I didn't feel any different. And something I can tell you now, having worked with so many people, is that when you actually change fascia, when you successfully change it, you feel instantly different, instantly different. And I didn't know that for 2.5 years. No one was teaching me anything about that. And we weren't talking about it, like I said. So I was just trying to follow my intuition and my instincts here. But what can we learn about fascia just from my story? And I'm going to tell you a couple other stories today too. Why didn't my fascia change? Why do you guys think my fascia didn't change? I was certainly stepped on a lot, So if quantity of hours of doing something is supposed to make a difference, it couldn't have been that. If maybe it has something to do with the technique, right? That's probably not all of it though. There are a lot of reasons why my fascia didn't change. Canella, there was no connection to the practitioner. I couldn't let go. Great comment. Absolutely spot on. Yeah, I definitely, but I didn't know that until I could let go. So have you ever had the experience of not realizing something until you have the hindsight, until you have the experience you want? It's like, I know this doesn't feel right, but like, I don't know how to get there because I don't know what right is yet. And that was my experience, I think, and Jess helped me figure out what right felt like, which is, yeah, where I'm the expert on my body. You don't tell me, what is and isn't true about my body. I get to decide how much weight you're using and be empowered to speak up. That was never invited before. And Elisha, thank you for that. Yeah, I needed to learn something. I certainly did. And like I said, I wouldn't have the passion and fire I have teaching all of this now if I hadn't been that person that tried to change my fascia for 2.5 years and it didn't change. So I didn't want to be that kind of practitioner either. Like I didn't want to be the practitioner who wasn't making changes to someone's fascia, but couldn't tell them why. Like I didn't want to be on the practitioner side of the experience I was having as the student of this other method. So that set me up to have a totally different outlook and mindset when I opened my full-time private practice in Boulder in 2011 to 2012. And within a pretty short period of time, I was seeing about 20 clients a week, had a wait list, and I was full, basically. Had a full-time private practice for about 8 years. And I worked with thousands of people, as I said at the beginning, mostly in chronic pain, like me. And by the way, for those of you that are new here, in 2011 with Jess, it took about 4 weeks total to teach her, how to step on me. So I was stepping on her, she was stepping on me. We were kind of figuring it out together. I taught her at least probably 50 techniques, head to toe, not just like the 1 or 2 techniques I thought would work. And that's a longer story than I have time for today. But it took about 4 weeks and I had no knee pain anymore. I was hiking and running again here in Colorado. The systemic tension was gone. The jaw pain was starting to shift. I could feel a difference in my nervous system, but I didn't have the language for it back then because I know it's like everywhere now, you guys. You've probably noticed talking about the nervous system, but nobody talked like that back then. But I just felt relaxed and at home in my body. Something fundamentally shifted in my state of being back then. And as I said, I didn't really have the language for it other than I could say then, and I've been saying it ever since, I felt light, I felt buoyant, and I felt like a kid again. It's a feeling I've described as physical joy. So there's emotional joy, but then there's physical joy, which is like abundant energy and vitality and a brightness, like you are the sun and you're bouncing over the earth. And that's how I felt in 2011, which was just mind blowing to me because I had been someone struggling with chronic fatigue and depression and social anxiety. And as I mentioned, gut pain and jaw pain and the knee pain and on and on. So to feel so physically joyful obviously caused an emotional joy as well. And to feel so physically capable, that was my vision of freedom. I could run again, I could hike again, I could climb mountains. It changed my life. And that feeling is the feeling I wanted to give other people. But more than anything, Jess and I figured out why I was in pain. Why? Why the knee? Why was this knee pain preventing me from hiking and running? She helped me figure it out. And that turned into what we did together that summer, turned into this mapping methodology. And we figured it out by just asking a lot of questions together and noticing my running gait and my, and noticing how I walk, my gait, just period, but how I ran specifically on my toes instead of using my heel, that I wasn't using my glutes. So I started, training my glutes and using my glutes more, and everything had an impact. It all came together in a matter of a summer to change my body. So when I opened my private practice, that's what I wanted to do for people. And that is what I started to do, is I created this mapping methodology. And every new client of mine goes through this mapping process, regardless of, I might have worked with 1,000 people with back pain, but just because I've worked with 1,000 people with back pain doesn't mean I know why you're experiencing back pain, if you are, because you are a unique human being. And so my job, if I'm going to work with you, would be to get to know your body and your fascia and your nervous system and your injury history and all the things that go into why your fascia is the way it is today, so we can know what needs to happen to fully transform. And fascia is such an amazing place to go for diagnostic data or information because it's the only element in our bodies that touches every other element. So fascia wraps every fibril of muscle tissue. Each tiny little fibril, it wraps the muscle fiber, which is made up of multiple fibrils. It wraps the muscle bundle and the muscle group. It turns into tendon, which attaches to bone. It wraps our bones. It wraps our nerves. It wraps our blood vessels. So kind of by accident, I feel like I've gotten a PhD in human physiology, but not the normal kind of physiology that you learn in textbooks. But to me, it's like a true physiology, a living physiology, where I'm looking at how a person's psychology and mindset and their beliefs and their traumas impact their body. And then in turn, how the body actually impacts our psychology and informs, our consciousness and emotional health and the patterns we bring to our relationships and the patterns we bring to our healing. So, for example, if you want to learn something about blood pressure, you better learn about fascia, because fascia wraps the blood vessels. And yet we never hear about fascia and its relationship to blood pressure and blood circulation issues. If we want to learn about the musculoskeletal system and, postural imbalances, hip hikes and hip tilts and glutes that don't fire like mine, which is partly why I was experiencing the knee pain, then we better learn about fascia's role in the musculoskeletal system and posture and gait and all of that. But then there's this whole experience, this whole reality phenomenon of some people not getting results, some people's fascia not changing, other people's fascia changing, some people's pain getting worse. And that points to this spiritual reality that I was talking about. So why do I call fascia a mediator between material and spiritual worlds? I'm curious if any of you have inklings of that yourself, or have anything you want to share that you've learned about fascia that could point to something really important to learn about our non-material reality as human beings. So yeah, thanks, Anne. Nancy. So by spiritual for today, I simply mean something we can't observe with our eyes, touch with our fingers. It's just not visible. So maybe esoteric is a good word. That's all that esoteric means, is hidden. So there are aspects to human nature that are hidden. We can't measure them objectively with scientific instruments. They can't be x-rayed. Like, you can't take an x-ray of your soul. So there are aspects to human nature that are invisible to the everyday senses that we all have, that we're used to using. But nevertheless, we can contact them, these spiritual realities. We can feel them. We can know them. We can certainly imagine them. So we do kind of have to use our imagination. But for example, in the world of pure physics, meaning rocks falling from bridges, pool balls getting, moving across a table after they're struck by a human. A pool ball, a rock, has no emotional life. It has no will of its own. It does not resist the force of being struck. A rock that is picked up by a human and dropped off a bridge does not resist the human dropping it off the bridge. It just falls, right? So non-spiritual, purely material elements, and I'm not saying there aren't any spiritual qualities to rocks, crystals, and that kind of thing. There are. But in terms of like having a will of its own, having an emotional life, I don't see that. So there's no will. There's no resistance offered. We can, through material science, measure, velocity. The laws of velocity, the laws of physics teach us about the velocity of a rock falling from a bridge at a certain distance. It'll reach a certain speed, et cetera, et cetera. You can't do the same thing with human beings. So that is the reason why, if I were to step on you, you're gonna fall into one of these three camps. Oh my God, it works. It's amazing. Or, I don't know, I don't feel anything. I don't feel any different. Or, actually, I kind of feel worse. So that phenomenon is pointing to something spiritual or esoteric about human nature and how it affects our bodies. That it is our inherent spiritual nature. That is why we can't treat our bodies like pool balls, which sounds ridiculous when I say it, but that's actually what we're doing all the time. If you think about it, a lot of the time, we do things to our bodies as if they're just inanimate physical objects. And so the primary teaching I wanted to share today is that if you actually want to work with fascia effectively, in my opinion, because I don't want to tell you what to do, it would be a good idea to learn what a human being is and how the human being impacts fascia and working with fascia. Only that knowledge is really going to help us understand why some people get out of pain and some don't. So I was going to share a couple other stories. One example I can give another example of this is of like why fascia won't just change. We can't just, like I got a comment on a YouTube video today that said, it was a video where I might have mentioned the fascia blaster or something about fascia not changing easily. And they said the fascia blaster works. It has now been scientifically proven. And I'm waiting for the day that most of humanity will understand the absurdity of such statements. Because works for what? We have to ask the question, what do you mean by works? So I'm assuming a lot of the time people mean it gets people out of pain, or it, quote, releases fascia. What does releasing fascia mean? This is an example of the kinds of questions I'm going to be asking in the study group. Like, what do we mean release fascia? Let's be specific, because otherwise we can't measure it. We won't know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and whether or not we're accomplishing what we're actually setting out to accomplish. So, like a painkiller, for example, might, quote, work to kill the pain, to silence it, in a not dissimilar way to how you might be able to silence a baby that's crying by putting duct tape over its mouth. It worked to stop the baby from screaming. So these are really like kind of terrible imaginations, but this is kind of how we're treating our body. So you certainly can beat the body into submission in a way, but I don't recommend it. There are certainly ways where we can silence our body's natural wisdom, but I don't recommend it. So there are very specific, personally unique and important reasons why each person's body and their fascia will or won't change given the circumstances, depending on the circumstances, right? So going back to me and Jess, working with her was so different that my body responded very positively and very fast. There are other people today who might step on me, I would just feel like guarded and brace myself against it, and nothing good would happen. Absolutely. That's definitely a possibility. I usually choose not to work with those kinds of people. But for example, sometimes when I'm teaching kinetics in person and I'm working with a new student who doesn't know what they're doing yet, that happens. And so if I didn't know what was happening, I wouldn't be able to protect myself and talk to the student and work with that experience. But I'm not going to sit there and pretend that this is all wonderful and isn't stepping just the most fabulous thing in the world, and aren't we all just feeling amazing? I'm not going to do that. So I had a client once who, in Colorado, a very successful entrepreneurial man who was going through a divorce. And he came to see me. This was not the first time he came to see me. He originally came to me for other issues. And he's kind of the kind of client that reaches out when he's in an emergency. And he loves getting stepped on. He likes what I do. And he had really good results the first time. But he reached out this time because he was experiencing intense arm pain and carpal tunnel and elbow tendonitis, and just like was feeling really terrible in his hands and his arms. And we went through, a normal upper body session. I hadn't seen him in a while, so I wanted to kind of get a sense of what was going on. And I just got the sense, I was like, your body's not responding to what we're doing the way it did before. What is going on in your life right now? And he hadn't told me what I just told you, which is he was going through a divorce. So he proceeds to tell me that, yeah, he's going through a divorce. It's really intense. Maybe that has something to do with it. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, maybe. And so he starts seeing me weekly for a little while to kind of problem solve it and figure it out. But his body was not not giving it up. His body was unwilling to let go of the pain, and his body was unwilling, his fascia was unwilling to change. And so he's a unique case and very fascinating because he's somebody who a year prior had changed instantly, rapidly, like instant positive, rapid results, like in one session. And he followed that through with like 3 or 4 other sessions and until he felt good and then stopped seeing me for a while. So I was very curious, like how does a person go from being very responsive and able to transform pretty rapidly through this method to not? It's very interesting. It was interesting to me. And so we started talking about it. And he started to share with me over the course of a few weeks that his wife, now, soon to be ex-wife, had cheated on him and then left him for the man she cheated on him with. And to cope with this, all the anger and rage that he was feeling, he was doing a lot of boxing and then finding himself constantly doing this, like squeezing his fists because he was so angry. And I share this story because it wasn't until he, of his own accord, because, I'm not here to tell people what to do, I just ask questions and get curious, kind of worked through the anger and the emotions and went to some therapy and did some meditating and other practices that he does, that his fascia started to change. And he then was able to resolve, we were able to resolve the hand pain, wrist pain, carpal tunnel, elbow tendonitis issue. And I have hundreds of stories like that I could share with you. It is not until we get to the bottom of things, like what is actually going on? Why is this person's fascia not changing? And I am not sharing that story to give you the idea that it's always emotional. It's not. It's not always emotional. But yeah, kind of like he didn't want to give up his anger yet. Exactly. And what I love about this client is I could say that to him and he could say that to me and we could almost even laugh about it. And so coming to see me was kind of a way to work through some of the intensity physically, but then he was working through the emotions with someone else. But we were naming it together. We weren't shoving it in the closet and not talking about it, practitioner to client. We were talking about it. So that's one other story. There are so many. Another one, I haven't told this story in a long time. And then I am going to open it up for Q&A here in a minute. Another story is a woman who had just been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and she was a friend of a friend. So I didn't know her, but she was referred by a really good friend of mine. So there's kind of some friend resonance or whatever, which is different than, other clients. And this was 2016, and I had just started doing nervous system mapping, and I was offering people to come in and do it for free or by donation if they were willing to experiment with me and let me kind of, get feedback from them and for them to share their experience. And so she was one of those clients. And within about 5 minutes of stepping on her, I knew that I would have to share some kind of like difficult feedback with her based on what I was feeling under my feet, what I was feeling in her fascia. Because what I was feeling in her fascia was absolutely nothing. Which is a weird feeling because you don't want fascia that isn't animated, that isn't responsive, where you can't, where it's not talking back and responding to being stepped on. It was just like stepping on rubber. And so I said to her, well, really, it was a question. There's nothing I could do to you today that would get to you, is there? And what I meant was by that, which she knew what I meant, but in case you're not following because you weren't there, and I'm probably not painting the full picture here on Zoom, is that what I meant is there's nothing I could physically do to you or say to you that would hurt you or get to you, that could poke you, prod you, get a rise out of you, make you angry, make you sad, make you anything. Like you're just not there. And ironically, that was the one thing that could get to her. And she immediately teared up and proceeded to share with me through tears how she stopped feeling through her childhood, stopped feeling emotions. So I worked with this woman over about 5 sessions to help her start feeling again, physically first. I wasn't trying to help her feel her emotions, but to help her feel her body, which is where emotions are felt. And she is now, I think, doing overall really well health-wise. She is someone who, unlike me, actually accepts diagnoses. I don't. And so she's someone who's living with multiple sclerosis. But she's a grief counselor. And she's turned this whole thing of not feeling and then starting to feel. She told me later she cried more that summer than she'd cried in her whole life. And she is now a grief counselor, and she does grief pilgrimages to Spain and all kinds of amazing work there through learning to feel her feelings again. And it was primarily, grief and all that comes with that she hadn't been able or willing to feel, the grief of the diagnosis for her. And after that, her fascia started to change and it started to become responsive. And so I wanted to share that story too, kind of from a different perspective than the first one, because as I mentioned at the start, our fascia is always reflecting us to us. And what is that? It's reflecting our soul and spiritual nature. It's reflecting our emotional life, how we've protected ourselves, our coping mechanisms. It's reflecting our habits. It's reflecting, there's so much in fascia that is getting reflected about our soul and spiritual nature and our material nature. And I want to close this class by explaining, characterizing what I mean by saying fascia is a mediator, because I don't just mean it's reflecting. And, of course, we all know there's a mind-to-body connection, but I mean it quite literally. So fascia is the element of the body that takes in information from everything and then sends it everywhere, including to the brain. But fascia takes in information from the environment, from other people, from the light sources, around us, from the temperature. It takes in sense impressions and sense data and whatever's getting sent through nerves electrically, and it sends those signals through the fascia is the vehicle through which our soul communicates through the body to the brain, to our higher self, so we can have awareness of ourselves. It's the mediator between, organs can talk to each other through the fascia. One part of our body is talking to another through the fascia. But mostly fascia is constantly mediating our physical spiritual reality. As a human being, we have a physical body that does have to obey physical laws, but we are also energetic and spiritual. We are 9/10 water and energy and 1/10 material and nature. But fascia is that it's like everything. Fascia is material, but it's also water, and energies are going through it all the time. So it is this amazing place to look for information about what's actually happening in our body, how to understand each of these separate elements, because all of the elements that fascia touches, which is every single distinct element in the human body, is impacted by our fascia. But we impact our fascia, and fascia is not just an inert substance. It actually obeys its own laws. And we're going to talk about this in the study group, but science has even shown that fascia has its own contractile cells, which means it can contract if it wants to for reasons of its own. And we'll go into that in the study group. It has been shown to have its own nerve receptor network, its own pain receptors, for example, so we can experience what is often referred to as fascia pain, because that's not the same as a nerve signal traveling from one part of the body to the brain. These are nerve receptors that live only in the body and don't send signals to the brain. So that's really fascinating. So those are just a few glimpses of what we're going to be covering in the study group. I see a lot of people having to leave. So I want to open it up and see if you have any comments or questions about fascia or anything else that I've shared, or about the study group. The study group is going to be by donation. There's a give what you can option. There's a suggested amount. You could give it monthly. You could donate a lot less. That's fine. If you have more time than money, I very happily accept your presence here on live Zooms as a form of tuition, because there will be no replays for other people without people showing up live. So I appreciate those of you today that did show up live. And I'm very excited to start this. As I said, there's so much to dive into with fascia that I don't even think we'll do it all in 9 months, believe it or not. But we'll do a lot, that's for sure. So if you want to hang out with me for 9 months and learn together, that is kind of the point of it. And I'm excited because we'll be able to take our time and go really deep into each specific aspect of how fascia impacts our physiology, our psychology, our potential for freedom and healing, regeneration. There's so much to go into. So water, all of it, light, electricity, magnetism, on and on and on. So many things. So we're going to do it all. And I'm excited. So thank you for being here. And I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon, evening, day, wherever you are. All right. Bye for now.